Okay, so we'll go ahead and get started. Happy New Year, everyone. My name is Vince, and I just want to welcome you to this presentation of the Best webinar series, brought to you by Novedge, the design software superstore. I want to thank all of you for joining us today. We're excited not only to present Strata 3DX CX Suite for designers, but to have Lex de Azevedo II on board with us, presenting, showing us, taking us through the program. Just a little background on Lex before we get started here. He has worked for Strata since 1991. He's a digital artist with nearly 20 years of experience in 3D user interface, print, web, and motion graphics. So he's a great guy to have for this. He knows what he's talking about. We're lucky to have him on board. Lex is going to speak for about the next 40 minutes or so. During that time, everyone will be in listen-only mode. But feel free to shoot your questions into the question box. During the end, we'll open it up for a Q&A to wrap things up. Having said that, I just want to mention really quick, we will be recording this webinar, so if anyone wants to view it afterwards, I'll give complete details on where you can find it. Having said that, I want to turn it over to Lex so we can get right into his presentation. Lex, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Great. I'm going to switch the screen over to you, and you can take it from there.
Thank you. Okay. Happy 2012, everyone. I'm actually very excited because this is my first webinar of the new year, and I'm very well caffeinated. So if I move too fast, feel free to just jot down a question, just like Vince said, and we'll get that throughout the presentation as well as the Q&A after. So here is visual representation of the Strata 3D CX Suite, and these are all tools for graphic designers to make their lives easier and to have a lot of fun. The first in the upper left-hand corner here is Photo 3D, and this is a program. It's a software digitizing program. It allows you to digitize real-world objects using a standard digital camera. And Fold 3D is an Illustrator plugin that allows you to create 3D package designs. It's great for package designers. Design 3D is our professional 3D modeling, rendering, and animation software. And Live 3D exports 3D models into interactive PDF documents and web pages with just a simple export command. So we're going to do a quick overview of how these work with the Adobe Suite, and how they all work together. So first, let's talk about Photo 3D. So this is a layered Photoshop document of this shoe, which is photographed at different angles and is masked. And let me hide the mask so you can see what the original photograph looks like. So you can see we have this mat, and this is a very simple photo shoot. It's a $50 light box, standard digital camera, and this mat is printed from Photo 3D, and this is kind of the grid that helps interpolate this into a 3D object. So we've taken a series of all these photographs and put them in a layered Photoshop document. So I'll kind of scroll through them so you can kind of see. All we're doing is rotating the shoe, and then we're masking it. So we're going to use the Photo 3D filter and say photo model. This is a really fun process, and especially to watch, because it's going to automatically load in all those layers. It's going to apply the mask, and it's going to start building the 3D model in real time right in front of us. So as you can see, as each mask gets applied to it, the 3D object gets refined more and more. So it starts out very rough, and then you can see it starts getting more and more refined. Now we're going to switch this to the wireframe view. So you can see as more and more information, these different angles gets applied to it, it refines it. Now it's going to do the same with the texturing. So it's kind of filling in all the gaps from all the different angles of the shoe and kind of filling that in with the texture. And it does it very quickly. Now also, I did the masking in Photoshop because I prefer Photoshop, but you can also do all of the masking directly in Photo 3D. So at this point, if I were to hit cancel, I would have options to export this as a 3DS file format, VRML file format, but I'm just going to send this model right back to Photoshop, and now we've got it as a 3D layer in Photoshop. So very cool, very fun stuff. That is pretty much how Photo 3D works. Now we're going to build, if we go back to our overview image, we're going to build a package design. We're going to build a package for our shoe in Illustrator. So I'm going to close this document. Let's go into Illustrator. And you see I've already created a package, and this is our die line. Now using Infold 3D, I've defined certain lines as a cut line and as a crease line. So if I do a select all and I click the fold option, it's going to take me into this folding mode. I'm going to select this bottom panel as the base panel and say continue. So now we've defined our box, and based off of what is a cut line and what is a crease line, I'm going to select all fold lines, and then I'm going to adjust the folding angle. And you can see in real time it's folding our box. So I'm just going to type in 90 because typically that's where we want most of our fold lines to be. You can see there are additional panels that need to be folded further degrees, but you can see it's very useful in the pack design and box folding process. Now let's go back to a document that has a more complicated box and it has the artwork applied to it. You can see over in our 3D view, we get a real-time view of what the packaging looks like with the artwork applied to it. So keep in mind, this will create, since this is all vector artwork and Illustrator artwork, we can still export this as a 3D model to bring into other 3D packages, or actually use this as the die line that we're sending directly to the packaging manufacturer. So that is another really cool, easy way to visualize what it is you're getting and to do the work once. So the work you're doing, the actual visualization, is going to go directly to the manufacturer for the packaging. So that's basically how Infold works. Now let's go back into Photoshop and let's talk about Design 3D. So Design 3D CX is our flagship program. It does 3D modeling, rendering, and animation. So let's kind of build, let me go back here. We're going to build this 3D sports drink that's going to go into our packaging here. And this is just an example of kind of my quick sketch of what I'd like the bottle to look like. I can start out from Photoshop and this will take this image and create, let me back up because I know I'm moving too fast. We're going to take this image, go to Strata Design 3D plugin and say Model New, and it's going to now apply that to a 3D plane so that I can trace. So we're now in Design 3D. Let's go to a front view, and using the 2D pen tool, I'm just going to click, and this works pretty much like the pen tool in Illustrator, and I'm going to trace my outline. And the pen tool gets tricky sometimes. Oh, I need to click on that once. There we go. Oh, let me start over with that. Okay, much better. And I promise this won't take too long. I'm actually good at the pen tool unless I'm in a webinar. No, just kidding. So we've got our basic outline, and if you're familiar with 3D, you've seen this feature that's called, it's either called revolve or lathe, but basically it's to make cylindrical shaped geometry. And it's very easy to do in Design 3D. I'm going to go over here to the lathe tool, and just by clicking on this handle here, one single click, and it automatically knew to spin it around the center of the object, and we now have our lathed bottle. And I did a pretty good job on that pen tool, I must say. So now, how do we apply a texture to this? Well, let's select it, go to New Texture, and this is the texture dialog. Don't let this scare you. It's very powerful, but once you kind of understand how texturing works in 3D, it makes a lot more sense. Just different. Keep in mind that these are just different properties of a texture. And we have the ability to bring in a Photoshop file, and it's going to automatically fill in from that Photoshop file all the correct layers and all the correct information, which is very cool because we can go back to that Photoshop document and edit it if we wanted to make any changes to colors, and it will automatically update here in Design 3D. So this just gives us a quick preview of what our texture looks like. I'm going to adjust the glossiness over here, and you can see over to the left it's adjusting those properties as well. So now we're seeing a little bit more glossiness, a little bit more reflection. Just say OK, and it has applied the texture to our bottle. If I do a quick render, you'll see we've got some bump maps showing up here to kind of give us the feeling that we've got the edge here. You see some of the logo is kind of puffy. We can adjust any of those properties at any time. So let's go back to the bump, and I'm going to increase that. Let's do 200%. Say OK and do a quick rendering again. And now you can see, OK, our logo is getting a little bit more raised off the edge there and puffy. Now this looks fairly flat and looks fairly fake 3D. I did set it up so it was reflective, but there's nothing being reflected in it. It's just in a vacuum. So the way we fix that is by adding in a reflectivity map. So now this image that's called reflective bridge will be reflected into this object. So that kind of gives us the idea that this is kind of a plastic, highly reflective image. So now we can use this. I mean, we could continue to use this in a scene in 3D, but just for the purposes of this demo, let's send it back to Photoshop. So now we're sending it back as, oh, I missed that. Let's see here. We're sending it back to Photoshop as a 3D layer. And that looks pretty good compared to my original sketch. So once you've got 3D objects in a 3D layer in Photoshop, there's a lot of fun things you can do. For artists out there, and I'm a designer, not an artist, there definitely is a difference. I've seen some artists do amazing painting onto 3D objects. Just to kind of give you an example of how that works, I'm just going to take a really bright color and just kind of paint in the diffuse channel layer just to give you an idea that literally you're just grabbing the painting tools and it's just painting it on the 3D surfaces. So once you have an object in Photoshop in the 3D layer, you can still do additional image editing and painting. So let's see. Let's go back to our overview. And it looks like, oh, this whole image right here. Let's talk about this entire image because we've created the shoe and we've imported into our scene. We've created the box and imported into the scene. We've created our water bottle and imported that into the scene. So let's talk a little bit about that. I'm going to go back to Strata 3D CX and open up this entire scene. So in the 3D world here, we've been able to import all of our objects into one scene. And the great thing is, of course, with 3D, you can render it, once you've created it, you can render it and view it from any angle. So we can set up cameras of the same product shot. You know, we can do a front view, we can do a side view, we can do a top view, and I do a little bit of product shots for companies to where this I can't even tell you how easy it makes it when you have a client that is saying, you know, okay, we need you to change the angle just very slightly, and if you're doing that with in a traditional photo shoot, you're going in and moving objects around and adjusting the lighting every time. To be able to do that in the 3D world is so much easier and so much more powerful. So I just clicked the render tool, and if you're familiar with 3D, you've probably seen this process. It's basically going through and refining the image, pass by pass. So it's automatically calculating reflections, shadows, highlights, texturing information. We have some very cool features in Strata 3D to give you like blurry surface reflections, so you can see rather than like a highly gloss mirror type reflection. Gives the illusion that's more of a textured blurry surface that these objects are sitting on. Now in the 3D world, typically when you render your final image, that's pretty much it. You take into Photoshop to do some post-editing, and you have very little control over what you can do with the final image. Typically you have like an alpha channel, so you can do some basic selections and you can do some touch-up. But Design 3D has a feature called Render to Layers. Let me show you that. You have the option to separate that image into various properties, and that will show up in Photoshop as different layers. So, and this probably doesn't make sense right now, but once I open it up in Photoshop, you'll see what I'm talking about. All of those, when I opened up the texture dialog, you saw all these different aspects, all these different parts that make of a texture. All of those can be rendered on their own layer, and then they're composited to create the final one. So if I go to Photoshop, and let's open up one of our final renderings, and you see over here in the layers, you see we've got all sorts of, if I hide, I'm going to hide certain layers. So here's all the specular light that's contributing to this rendering. All the reflected light, which you can't see very well, all the reflected light within that layer, ambient light, shadows, ambient shadows, etc., etc. And it's all combined to make the final image. So what that allows us to do, and I'm going to go ahead and revert this image to the original version, it allows us to take any aspects of that image and tweak them. So for example, our specular light, say, well, we need, those highlights aren't bright enough. I can select that layer, I'm going to open it up in levels, I'm going to do an auto so that and you can see it changed that range, so it's very bright now. So just using the opacity of that layer, we can bring that down all the way to 0 with no specular light versus bring that back up to a very shiny reflective surface. So just within Photoshop, you're now editing the various aspects of that image. So now I can adjust the specular there, say that our art director says, I don't like the reflections on the floor. Typically you would have to go back to the 3D model, adjust your reflected settings, re-render it, bring it back and say, does this look good? Well, we've got our reflected light on its own layer, so you could just turn that off and say, hey, let's just get rid of the reflections, that's a better image. Or why don't we just kind of tone down the reflections a little bit using opacity here and maybe just make it a little bit more subtle. So that right there is a major time saver when you're doing the post-editing work on a 3D image. Additional selection masks, which are kind of more advanced, but I think probably a lot of you, if you've done some photography work and you're kind of looking for a realistic depth of field and image blur, it creates a depth mask that you can use in the, I believe it's the blur filter, to actually give you different blur based on the objects that are in the foreground and background. So that's what the depth mask is for. Then you have object selection masks. So if you just need to select just the shoes, for example, oops, I need to select that mask first. So if you needed just to do some selections on the shoes, and go back to, for example, you wanted to get rid of the shadows, you wanted to adjust any of the diffuse color, you could do that just with all those different selection masks. So it makes the post-editing process very, very easy. So now let's talk about Live 3D. And I realize I've been flying through this. So hopefully that's a good thing. I would rather keep you wanting more than bore you. So the last tool in the suite is Live 3D. And let's bring up a document here. And let's shut down some things here real quick. Okay, so we're back in Photoshop. What we have here is we have a flyer that we've designed. We've got our shoe that we created in Photo 3D, and we brought this in as a 3D layer. Now, if we just wanted to flatten that, distribute it as a JPEG or just as a flattened PDF, et cetera, that would, or print it out, that would be great. What's really impressive is to be able to give your customers or clients a PDF that you can do exactly what I just did, with a 3D layer, is rotate this object. So it's as simple as this. I'm going to make a selection, and this is going to represent the 3D view within our PDF document, because we're going to save this as a PDF document. You just make the selection. We're going to go to our filter, Live 3D, we're going to select PDF, and it's going to bring up the dialog that allows us to pick, well, several things, just some quick selection information, or it's going to make us wait for a minute. And of course, I did this a dozen times before this presentation with no problems, and of course, the 13th time is the magic number. So let's try that again. Let's open up the Photoshop document. Oh, let's do this in 4. That'll be better. Okay. Oh, now we have too many versions of Photoshop open. So let's do this again. Take the selection and go to our filter, Live 3D PDF. There, that's how it works. Select image quality, and we're defining our 3D frame as the selection that I just made. And the background, I want to keep that as white. Then we have a few navigation bars over here that we can select. I'm just going to stick with that one and say OK. And going to save that as Aqua PDF. It kind of launches Live 3D in the background really quick and makes our PDF and automatically brings it up in Acrobat for us. So now we're in Acrobat with our PDF document, and you don't need anything special to do 3D in Acrobat. It already comes with it. So now we've got a PDF document with an interactive shoe rather than just the photograph of it, and I guarantee you have clients or customers that get this version of the PDF document where they can reach in and zoom in on your product, spin it around. That's going to be a far more powerful presentation, and possibly something they haven't even thought of, or you haven't even thought of, is the ability to do 3D versions of your products within a PDF and within a web page. So let's close that out. I'm going to open up our image here. And that, like I said, I flew through that pretty quick, but like I said, I'd rather be brief and to the point than drag things on. So to kind of recap the overview, of the Strata 3D CX Suite. Photo 3D is a software digitizing program just using a standard digital camera, nothing fancy, and you can digitize real-world 3D objects. Enfold allows you to do all the design for packaging, to fold it up, to see what it's going to look like as a finished package design. Design 3D, full-featured 3D modeling, rendering, animation, the render to layers, the being able to send objects back and forth from Photoshop as a 3D layer, and then live 3D exporting to PDF documents and web pages as one click. So hopefully after showing all this to you, there's a 3D light bulb hovering over your head, and you can see all the possibilities of how 3D can make your projects just easier and more powerful and more fun. That is pretty much it. I believe we're going to go to a Q&A now. Also, I just wanted to give out my email address if anyone had any questions, if I went too fast, if you missed something. It's really easy, lex@strata.com, so L-E-X, lex@strata.com, and feel free to email me any of your questions. And I think, let's see, Vince, do you want to let me know how the Q&A works now?
Yeah, I don't know. Right now, there's no one sent anyone in any questions in. So if anyone has some to send in, feel free to send them in now. I just had a quick question. What additional resources do you guys have if someone wants to, tutorials or sort of like training manuals? Do you guys, anything, any good resources that we can advise to people?
Yes, we have several. We have, let's see if I can bring up the websites here real quick. Several online resources. First of all, we have the Strata Cafe is one of the websites. So you can go to Strata Cafe, and this is kind of the user community. So anywhere from galleries to forums, there's as far as actual 3D resources, a lot of people upload them for free. So other people can use them in their projects. We also have the Strata 3D University. Make sure I'm spelling university correctly. And the 3D University, you can see there are a lot of training categories, tutorial categories. There are a lot of free tutorials, and then for some of the more advanced tutorials, it's basically, you can see it's a subscription, 2-week introductory, 99 cents, and then $14.95 a month. And you get all the best training materials from our top users.
Okay.
Also with the program, there's some basic, there's basic tutorials that come with the CX Suite for all the different programs to help you get started as well.
Great. Here's one from Cliff. He says OSX okay, and I guess to follow up on that, what are some of the specific hardware specs that you would need to run any of the Strata products?
For that, I'm going to go to the Strata website, and I'm going to have, Strata, S-T-R-A-T-A. Let's go to the Strata website and look those up. Just so you know, a lot of great information at strata.com. If we take a look at the, let's see, where are the, here we go, feature lists and system requirements. So, and these are just going to be the minimum system requirements. When you're doing high-end 3D, the industry joke just for decades has always been, the fastest computer you can afford, the most RAM you can afford, the, just whatever you can throw at it, you want to do that. Now, it's really interesting because the hardware compared to in the last few decades is so much, it's obviously exponentially faster than it used to be. I mean, we used to have to, there were times in the early 90s where you would set up a rendering and come back the next day to see what it looks like. Now that same process happens within a few minutes. But just to answer the specific minimum requirements, Mac OS X 10.5 or later, 2 gigs of RAM. Obviously, the faster the processor, the faster the rendering times, and the faster the redraw speeds. But rather than go through that is just for Strata 3D, the main, our flagship product. If you do go to strata.com, you can look up the system requirements for each of our products.
Okay, cool. Here's one from John. He asked, does StrataVision interface easily with Vectorworks 2011?
He must be an old school user because StrataVision was the very first version in the 90s. So yeah, I give him props for being from the old school. That's going to be a technical question. I'm not going to be able to answer that off the top of my head. I'm wondering if that's something that you may just want to send to me, lex@strata.com, and I will forward that on to our technical people, and they can get an answer back to you on that. And if you want to post a really technical question, I probably won't be able to answer it. Any of the general questions about, this is the kind of project, does it do this, how, I can definitely answer those. Is it good for logo animations, et cetera, et cetera. The super technical questions, lex@strata.com, and I will get those answered for you.
Okay, cool. Here's one from Darren. He says, when photographing the product, is lighting an issue, being that the image may be lit differently when rotating?
Well, that's the thing, is that the lighting is not different. Typically, and actually, if I go back to, I can go back to that document real quick. Since you're actually rotating it on a turntable, on a Lazy Susan, so the lighting is consistent. You're not moving any of the lights. You're actually rotating the, for example, the shoe. I'm almost embarrassed to, you can see my setup here is using a styrofoam cup as my pedestal here. But the idea is that you're then rotating, the shoe. So the lighting is very consistent. Like I said, I use just a very inexpensive light box, so it's nice, even lighting. And it's mostly for the lighting has to do with the texturing. The masking is to help define the shape of the object. So it's really more about for the texturing. Oh, I've done some things here. So yeah, typically you're just rotating the object, and all your lights are in the same place, to answer your question.
Okay, cool. Here's one from Brian. I'll get the two of them he has in there. The first one's, what import capabilities does design have? For example, he currently uses Inventor, but he also uses CS4 and is looking to use 3D in product documentation. And then additionally,
Okay.
Can you import large assemblies?
I'm going to just show you very quickly what the import list is here as far as the object types. There may be a specific list on strata.com, but as far as the import list here, these are all the file types that we can import. I'm not familiar enough with what is referring to as large assemblies. That's going to be more of a technical question. But in general, there's so many different file formats. There's always a way to get your geometry into Strata 3D. Even with the program that you're using, you may need to export it to a standard file format. Some people use third-party converters, but in general, we have just a lot of different options for importing models into Design 3D.
Okay, great. Let's see here. Oh, here's a good one from Brian. He said, are demo versions available to try out?
Yes, they are. You can go to strata.com, and pretty much on each of the product pages, let's go back to the various products. If there is a tryout available, and I believe there's a tryout for everything, then you can just download a trial for live, download a trial for Design 3D. Yeah, so if there's a specific version or specific product of the suite that you want to try out, all these products are available individually. Obviously, the best deal is to buy it in the suite, and of course, Novedge sells. You can go to the Novedge site to look up the products. As far as plugging you guys, that would be
Yeah, thank you. Much appreciated.
in the 3D section, you can find the CX suite, which is where you'd want to buy it from. But yeah, as far as you could get all the tryout versions from Strata.com.
Okay, cool. Here's an interesting.
So yes, I was just confirmed there are tryout versions for all four. So yes.
Okay, cool. Here's another one from Darren. Do you have any marketing tips for someone looking to produce 3D product design?
Marketing tips for 3D design.
I guess more specifically to make like your designs pop, I guess, through using Strata. You know, making your designs more appealing.
Well, just by showing, just by starting to use 3D, you'll come up with kind of new ways in which you can start doing your, for example, packaging here. If you're a traditional designer, you're kind of just showing maybe just like hand-drawn sketches, which is very cool, or maybe you're doing some Photoshop airbrushing techniques, which is very cool. But if you were then to compare that to what you can get with 3D of photorealistic rendering and angles, because if you're doing a hand-drawn rendering, typically you might just do a front view, a side view, a top view, versus actually handing your client, here's the 3D model of what your shoe would look like, or your package design would look like, or what your logo would look like. It just makes it, it's pretty much obvious to the observer that, hey, this is something that is different and cool and interactive and engaging. So once you kind of start producing artwork in 3D, people notice that. It does set you apart. It's like, how did you do that? I want that look. And you'll always find, I think Photoshop can do just about anything. And you can always find tutorials to, because I'm always curious about 3D tutorials in Photoshop, and it's always about how to fake 3D effects. And you can do some great 3D effects without using 3D in Photoshop, but what you find out is that you're limited to just the view of what you're looking at. So if you create a logo and it's at a 45-degree angle, etc., that's it. If you do that same logo in 3D, you can view it in any position. You can make a spinning animation of it and put it on someone's website, as an animated GIF file. You can export it to video. You can do so many different things with a real 3D object, and basically you do the work once and you reuse it over and over again. So I think if you start, as far as marketing goes, I think your customers or clients will notice that you're doing something different. And just a really quick personal example, someone came to me and said, I know that you do 3D, and we just designed a package for a drink, or packaging, we just designed a label for packaging for I believe it was like a juice drink. And they said, we kind of have a sketch of, and very similar to the example I showed earlier with the sports bottle, it's like we kind of have a sketch of what the bottle is going to look like. It's going to look like one of those Gatorade bottle kind of things. And we have this flat label, and the client wants to see what the label looks like wrapped around the bottle. And in 3D, that's literally like, 3 minutes. 3 minutes to do that and show them what it looks like and hand them a Photoshop file that says, here you go, take a look at it, rotate it from any angle, versus the old-fashioned way. It's, you're trying, you're trying to wrap it around in Photoshop, and you're trying to do the shading, and you got to show 4 different angles, so you do the front, side, and all that stuff. You're going to spend all this time faking up a 3D representation of that, in that case, the drink packaging, where if you knew how to do it in 3D, you knock it out in 5 minutes, and you completely blow away your customer or your client because you know how to do 3D. So really just 3D just speaks for itself. People know that you're doing something different. Also, if any of you are interested in, let's go back to the Strata website. I can see everyone is looking at my frequently visited websites. That's embarrassing. You can go to, let's see. Oh, well, you can look at. You can see the showcases on the Strata.com website to see basically image examples. So don't take my word for it. Go to the website and see images that have been done by our top users, as well as the Strata Cafe. Strata Cafe Image Gallery is, like I mentioned, it's just the user community. So in here, you're going to see anywhere from amateur users posting their images saying, hey, how can I make this more realistic, to really high-end users posting images. For example, I purposely clicked on Chris Tyler here because his images are so photorealistic you would have no idea that they're generated in 3D. And if you get the chance to go to stratacafe.com and you see any of the images posted by Chris Tyler, I would highly recommend viewing those images, because it will just blow your mind, the possibilities of what you can do with 3D. And we don't realize that in the advertising world and on TV and in movies, a lot of the stuff we think is real is actually done. It's actually CG graphics. It's done in 3D. So yeah, just a lot of good examples on the Strata Cafe gallery, anywhere from amateur to expert images. Also, Chris, who I just mentioned, I just showed one of his images, is also the one that produces most of the tutorials on the Strata 3D University. So he's the one that's basically saying, hey, if you want your images to look like this, I can get you there. So that, let's see, yeah, Chris Tyler, Strata Cafe, yep.
Yeah, good, great. Here's another one about further resources. John was wondering, are you considering conducting any location seminars in the future? For example, in Atlanta or other cities where it's more like classroom setting, I guess, training?
In the past, I'm trying to think if, and I'm waiting for the official word from my, in the past, we have a third-party company that was doing those, and it found it more efficient to set people up with Strata trainers on more of a kind of, we can send someone out to your business, to your group of designers, to kind of set up a personal training seminar. That's kind of how, just with technology, that's kind of how it's ended up, is more, just like we're doing a webinar here, it's more cost-effective to do an online seminar that's tailored specifically for an individual or for a company's needs. So it's typically done online, or if a company were to get they want to have their people trained, their graphic designers trained, they can contact us, and we can get them hooked up with a trainer.
Okay, great. Let's get to a couple more here. John missed here's one from John again. He missed the first 10 minutes of the program, but I don't think he mentioned it either way. He was wondering, what version of Acrobat would you need to enable the rotation feature?
I'm pretty sure it's been in Acrobat for a long time. Let's go back to, okay, so just the most basic version of Acrobat Reader. So it's nothing, it's not a special version of Acrobat Reader. or excuse me, Adobe Reader, um, that version can do the 3D rotations. Acrobat is more of the you're assembling, you're editing, that type of thing. But typically, anyone can download Adobe Reader for free, and so anyone with Adobe Reader would be able to manipulate 3D objects in the PDF.
Okay, great. Here's one from Scott. What would a typical file size be for a PDF with placed 3D?
Well, let's take a look at that PDF that I just created. Now, it's all going to be based off of the complexity of the model. So, for example, the shoe.
Lex, I would want to jump in there. Your mic's kind of cutting out there. It's a little fuzzy.
Oh.
I don't know.
Let's make sure that I haven't pulled it out of the ports. Can you hear me okay? Am I okay now?
Still fuzzy there.
That's strange. I haven't done anything. I promise. You're saying it's not as loud, or it's actually staticky.
It's just really staticky, and there's some feedback. I don't know.
That's very strange. I haven't done anything. I can try plugging it in. I'm plugging it back in. Let's see if that helps. Let's see. Okay. Does that help?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. Let's see here. Okay, so back to the question about the PDF. This PDF with a shoe in it is only 396K. So that's pretty reasonable as far as a PDF file goes. Now, once again, the size of a PDF is determined by how many other additional graphics you have in there, and how complex a model would be. You could probably get them up to a couple megabytes if you had something fairly complex.
Okay. Let's see here. Lex, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so let me think. I mean, the only other questions that are left are, if you show more modeling and more of the back and forth between Photoshop, I don't know if there's a quick example you could do in maybe 10 minutes to show a little bit more of that.
Sure. Let's see. Let's see here. Let's see if I can just whip up some files here. Now, just to let you know, Design 3D comes with about, I think it's close to 2 gigabytes of pre-made textures, shapes, effects, gels, and backgrounds. So, when you start out with a project, it kind of gets you headed in the right direction. You can use any of these. So let's see here. Let's go to shapes. Let's go to electronics, and let's import an iPad. So just in Design 3D, just in the environment, you have a grid that you're working on. Any kind of transformations to, I know at this point I'm not showing actual modeling. This is just something really quick that I grabbed that was pre-made. There sometimes I'm going to send this model to Photoshop, and it'll send it to a 3D layer. Now, some of the models need to be optimized a little bit, and so if I send this and something doesn't look correct, it's because I haven't done any kind of optimization on it. So yeah, as you can see, this has some interesting issues. There's a little bit of optimization that goes into, since I didn't actually create this model, but when I create a model, I know how to optimize it. So for example, when we did that lathe object, we did the, I'm trying to find the, there's so many shapes in here now, wow. Let me see if I can find a good example. Yeah, oh, this would be good. Let's go ahead and import that into our scene. Okay. So real quick, you can group objects. I'm double-clicking on it and kind of deconstructing it. An extruded object here, a second lathed object here, another lathed object here. Just very, very basic pieces. So let's send that one to Photoshop. And let's do new document. I probably should have prepared more demo files because I just figured that I wouldn't even have enough time and we'd go right into the Q&A. But I actually have quite a few very cool demo files. So here is that can that we just sent directly into the 3D layer from Photoshop. I didn't even touch on all of the different modeling tools within Design 3D, because that would definitely be a Design 3D. When we do kind of the Design 3D overview, that's where we go into the dozens of modeling tools, geometry types, different ways to create geometry, including subdivision surface modeling for those that know what that means. That's where you can take objects, extrude them. Let's see here. So you can take surfaces and extrude points, extrude faces, and then take the entire thing and put it in a subdivision surface cage where you're now adding resolution to the object. There's Boolean operations. Let's see if I could go down the list here really quick. Just basic primitives, 2D objects for creating lathed objects, extrusions, the 3D pen tool. You've got extrude along a path, skinning, Booleans, deformation, so you can actually create an object and then put a deformation around it and kind of tweak it. That's definitely an entirely other webinar, and maybe one day we'll be able to, maybe if I get invited back, we can do that.
Yeah, one. The sequel. But, yeah.
So there are just dozens of 3D creation tools within Design 3D, and I mean we didn't even talk about animation. We didn't talk about a lot of things, but yeah. So that will and basically because we have so many different special 3D types, object types. Photoshop, and this is probably where I'm going to get too technical and bore a lot of people, but basically it needs to be converted to a polygon mesh so that Photoshop, because that Photoshop can read these file formats that are polygon meshes basically. So as long as whatever you do, and we have the tools to do that, whatever you may be able to make these fancy shapes, but then you've got to break it down to a polygon mesh, which is easy to do before you send it into Photoshop, and then you can do, you can set it up. You can even animate 3D in Photoshop, which a lot of people don't know. You can do basic rotations and movements all within Photoshop with 3D objects.
All right, so I think we'll close things there. We got to a good portion of questions. I'm going to go ahead and switch the screen back over to me, and we will wrap things up. Okay, so great.
And once again, just wanted to give out my email address if I didn't answer any of those questions, or if there's some additional questions that come up, lex@strata.com.
Yeah, again, yeah, feel free. Lex is a great guy. He would love to hear from you. And yeah, I just want to thank everyone who attended. Many thanks to you, Lex, for this tremendous presentation. I'm sure everyone out there has found it as fascinating as I did. Yeah, and then thank you everyone who attended this presentation, Novedge's Best of the Best webinar series. I just want to give a quick little spiel here on Novedge if you're unfamiliar with us. We're the leading online design software superstore. Not only do we have the best prices, our staff is extremely awesome. They would love to hear from you. Any questions, anything about pricing or subscriptions or anything, feel free to email us. We would love to answer those for you. As Lex said earlier, we do have Strata. We have the lowest price around. We will also match any price that you can find out there, so feel free to email us if you have any questions about pricing. Yeah, we have it both Windows and Mac. Yeah, just feel free to just give us a call or email us if you have any questions about getting your own version of Strata. Last thing I'd like to bring your attention to is WikiCAD here. It's sort of an online community we've created where we post tutorials and info about all things design and CAD and all that sort of thing. So it's definitely something worth checking out if you have the time. Just go to the wikicad.org if you have any questions about that. So again, having said all that, just want to thank everyone who's attended. In the top left corner, you can see our Strata sales specialist, Bob, at Novedge. He'd love to answer any questions you may have. And there's my email, Vince at Novedge, if you have any questions about the webinar or further webinars. So, yeah, I mean, Lex, is there anything you want to say real quick before we sign off?
Other than, we look forward to having you as a Strata 3D user, and we wish you a great 2012. And just if you haven't got into 3D yet and you've been kind of afraid to, hey, it's a new year. And let me tell you, I don't work for a living. I have fun for a living. 3D is so fun. You will, once you get into it, so many possibilities for all of your projects. You'll absolutely love it. So we hope to see you on the Strata Cafe user community in the near future.
Yeah, definitely. Don't feel intimidated by the learning curve either. They have tons of tremendous resources to get you started. So definitely consider getting yourself into 3D with Strata. So having said that, we'll see you guys next time.